It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join News Director Paul David and News Editor Philip Catalfamo as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics in Yavapai County that affect all our lives. And now here's today's Countywide.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catalfamo. I'd like to thank you for joining me. On today's show, we're talking COVID-19 effects on the upcoming school year, and my guest over the phone today is Yavapai County School Superintendent Tim Carter. Mr. Carter, thank you very much for joining me.
Good morning, Philip. It's always my pleasure.
Of course, Mr. Carter is definitely not unfamiliar with the show. We've had him on several times. So, obviously, COVID-19 has been affecting everybody, and of course it has been affecting the schools. So I want to start with this. Could you take me through the process of initially closing the schools and then the decision of going online?
Certainly. So let's start with what I think is a pretty telling statement. This is just finishing up my 46th year in public education, and I have never seen anything like this before, not even close. And we have had other situations where we have dealt with viruses and those kind of things, but it certainly isn't anything like what we're dealing with now. So we need to go back to March. By early March, we knew that it certainly appeared as if there was a pandemic on the horizon, and there was already discussions and some planning around that. For most of our schools, certainly the schools in the Verde Valley, the real issue hit right before spring break and during spring break, so mid-March. The schools actually had several conversations about how they were going to deal with the issue and whether they were going to close the school before the governor actually came out and issued his executive order. So it helped us a little bit in the fact that it corresponded with that week where most of our staff and most of our students were actually already on a break. So the good news of that was for, again, most of our schools, we had a grade for those students through the first 3 9-week periods, and we had 9 weeks to go. And so everybody knew that we had to come up with a plan as to how to deal with that 9-week time period. So most of the schools, in fact, a great majority of them in the state, ended up coming to the conclusion that we were going to try to hold students as harmless as we possibly could, because it obviously wasn't their fault. It was something that we were all being subjected to.
Right.
And so most schools came up with a policy that said, all right, whatever grade you had at the end of that third 9-week period, will be the grade that we would assume that you're going to receive. It really shouldn't go down, but it could actually be improved depending on your level of work and how much you were able to do during the last 9 weeks. And then our 26 districts and our 24 charters, I can't absolutely say that any of them did exactly the same types of things, but we can certainly talk about, in general terms, how they decided to proceed. But I think that kind of brings your listeners up to from where we were kind of in a traditional school year to where all of a sudden we were in a pandemic and we were going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, and there were a lot of major changes. I do remember around that time, in the beginning of or the middle of March or whatnot, when spring break was going around, and kind of thinking about all these kids are going to have to come from those areas and then make their way back into schools. But of course, you guys ended up going with the decision to go online. What challenges have you found with this first wave?
Well, actually, we have found lots of challenges. Anytime you're making that kind of an abrupt change in the middle of a school year, it is not something that most schools and parents and students and staff are able to assimilate quickly, and that was certainly the case. It took us a while to determine exactly what we were going to do, and again, every district and every charter may have had some variation of some of these things. But the decision was fairly quickly made that we were going to need to try to cover as much material as we would normally cover during that last 9-week period. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that schools quickly realized was that online was not necessarily going to be the solution. You don't just go from a face-to-face environment to an online environment. It takes years. I can still remember when Dr. John Sperling, who initially started the universities in that direction with the University of Phoenix,
yes,
he said it's going to be a 30-year process. And if you look back at it, the universities literally took about 30 years to actually get to a point where now almost everybody has some online programming and some are completely online. Our school districts and our charter schools certainly were not able to shift gears that quickly. Now, the good news is that for most of our districts, we have the capacity from the standpoint of broadband, because we were very lucky here several years ago to be the first county to be awarded that state infrastructure grant, where we were able to make sure that all of our schools had 100 megs mm-hmm. of capacity for broadband. So the schools have the ability to be able to access the information and to be able to put it out. What we found was that we were not prepared in a couple of other ways. Number one, most of our teachers were not prepared to start teaching online. We didn't necessarily have the academic platform or a variety of platforms to be able to teach online. We didn't necessarily have the time frame in which to go from a face-to-face environment to an online environment, because those teaching styles and those teaching methods are different, and that's a fairly substantial issue. Then the bigger issue evolved is that even though the schools had some capacity to deliver that information virtually, we had some school districts where the parents had almost no capacity to actually receive it into their home. Chino Valley School District, for example, is estimating that about 50% of their students have no access online at home. Wow. And so even if the school had the greatest capacity around and all their teachers were prepared and they were ready to deliver instruction online, if you can't get the broadband into the homes of the students or you don't have Wi-Fi to do that, there's this disconnect. And so what we actually ended up doing in most districts and charters was you had an online component if you could access it, and then we had to create basically paper and pencil and using buses or a pickup delivery system with parents that met all of the social distancing requirements so that they actually could do homework in a kind of a traditional format, paper and pencil,
right,
or if they had the ability, they could do it online.
So we've just got one more question before we have to send it to break. Have you dealt with special education? How have you dealt? Let me rephrase that. How have you dealt with special education needs throughout this pandemic?
Well, again, there's not one size fits all. The one thing that I think everybody understood is that special education requirements continue whether there's a pandemic or not. And so schools were doing the very best that they possibly could in trying to deliver whatever services that those students needed, if it were possible to do so. And so it really is across the board. I think we had some districts and charters who really were able to continue to meet with those students and provide whatever those services were. Our office, for example, provides a lot of special ed services to districts, and so our staff was pretty much involved the entire time. But we had some that we just weren't able to provide those services because either there wasn't transportation, the schedules didn't work, trying to do things one-on-one instead of doing them in smaller groups obviously compounds issues of being able to put a teacher or a therapist with a student. And then the needs of students aren't the same. They're all very different. And so people realized that, yes, we need to provide these services. And to be quite honest, I think we just simply did the very best we could. It certainly wasn't to the level that students and parents or staff had hoped it would be. And to be quite honest, I think that's going to be an ongoing concern, what might ever happen in the future.
We're going to continue our conversation with Yavapai County School Superintendent Tim Carter on the other side of this break. Countywide will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical, heating, air conditioning, and plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle, get Gettles.
Hi, this is Greg at Verde Solar Power. You know, Arizona has lots of clean, renewable sunshine, and we want to help you take advantage of it with our quality solar installations, and we offer to beat any written offer on a residential solar electric system. So bring us your electric bill and let us show you how solar power will save you money. We're located conveniently here in the Verde Valley and are dedicated to helping the valley go solar. So remember, the energy solution comes up every morning.
So I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born, and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Orkin has pest control down to a science.
When your business chooses Orkin's Precision Protection Program, you get a tailored pest control program for your specific industry and environment.
Your business can benefit from over a century of experience, training, and scientific knowledge that define the Orkin man.
Maximum protection, minimum exposure, backed by one of the industry's most comprehensive guarantees.
Choose your locally owned and operated Northern Arizona Orkin and get more than an exterminator. Get an expert.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catalfamo. On today's show, we're talking the COVID-19 effects on the upcoming school year, and my guest over the phone today is Yavapai County School Superintendent Tim Carter. We talked about before, now let's talk about during. Let's start off with this one. Do you now have to prepare 3 school year scenarios? And what I mean by that is a scenario that has, a regular school year, no COVID issues, no restrictions, a school year that has full COVID-19 restrictions, and a third scenario that maybe is what we're seeing now, which is we start the school year with our optimism, and then unfortunately we have to go back to the online learning. Is there now that planning process when planning the next school years?
Well, the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. The bigger problem is that we have much more immediate issues that we have to determine right now. We still have schools trying to figure out what to do with promotion ceremonies and graduation ceremonies. And then we have almost all of our schools trying to figure out what are they going to do, if anything, with summer school. So let's chat about that real quickly, and then we'll go back to your original question. So most of our schools have decided that if they're going to do summer school, it's going to be electronic. It's going to be online. And the face-to-face portion of summer school, for the most part, is going to be up to each individual district or charter, but it's going to be very, very difficult for them to be able to do that with the time frame in which we're working, especially if we're looking at a June session. Mm-hmm. If it's a July session, that might be more workable, but that's really going to be a local control decision. So we're dealing with those types of things. At the same time, we're trying to plan for next year. And we're planning for next year, as you said, with different scenarios, not knowing which of those scenarios is the one that we're going to deal with. So the one that everybody is hoping is happening is it's just a regular school year without any kind of pandemic interruptions.
Of course.
Well, that would be nice, but I don't think anybody really thinks that's going to be the way it's going to work. we think that there are going to be some kind of restrictions. Part of the problem is we don't know what those restrictions are going to be. The county superintendents, district administrators, and charter administrators have been letting Superintendent Hoffman and Governor Ducey and his staff know that the sooner we can have decisions on those kind of things, the better it's going to be for us. If the governor would simply be able to say, here are the topics that the state is going to regulate. Everything else that's not on that list, and we don't know how quickly we're going to regulate those things or give you guidance, but we're going to take care of these things. Everything else, the local district and charter, you need to make your own decision to move forward. That would be extremely helpful. We are not there yet.
Right.
So we really just, it's like throwing all the balls up in the air and not knowing where they're going to land and who's going to catch them and who's going to be responsible for them. So the schools are developing plans within plans based on that. But I think the scenario is most of us are anticipating that there are going to be some kind of restrictions. And the one that is the biggest concern for everybody is the 6-foot restriction. And I think everybody understands why there's a 6-foot restriction. The social distancing thing is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. But let's just think about that. Let's say you have a traditional classroom that's 50 by 50. Normally, in that classroom, you might have up to 30 students.
Yes.
Well, if you have to have a 6-foot restriction around each individual student, that's 113 square feet. So you take a room that's 50 by 50, and then you divide it by 113 square feet. And that tells us you're only going to be able to get 13 or 14 students and a teacher in that classroom.
Right.
Well, we just have to realize that if that's going to happen, we have to lengthen our school year, we have to lengthen our school day, we have to go on double or triple sessions.
Yes.
We have to alternate days, we have to alternate weeks. I mean, we've got to do something to reduce those class sizes down to where you would be able to have that number of students and staff that continually keep this 6-foot distance. And I will tell you, that is going to be very problematic. And it is going to disrupt whatever that is, if that's the rule. It is definitely going to disrupt what we think of as a normal school year.
Well,
are we going to have to take temperatures as students come on campus? Are we going to have to dismiss them for the day if they're coughing or sneezing or have a runny nose? I mean, these are all of the types of things that we're thinking about. What do you do with kids on buses?
Yeah.
Do you have to double the number of bus runs? What are you going to do about cafeteria? What are you going to do about physical education?
Right.
What are we going to do about high school athletics and middle school athletics?
Yeah.
So all of these things are having to be considered, and right now we really don't have guidance. I mean, CDC is still saying the 6-foot rule is important.
Yes.
Are we going to be wearing masks? Are we all going to be doing those kind of things? We honestly don't know.
Well, we still got a lot to talk about with Yavapai County School Superintendent Tim Carter. When we come back on the other side of this break, we will look forward to the new school year. When we come back, Countywide will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle. Get Gettles.
Hi, this is Greg at Verde Solar Power. You know, Arizona has lots of clean, renewable sunshine, and we want to help you take advantage of it with our quality solar installations, and we offer to beat any written offer on a residential solar electric system. So bring us your electric bill and let us show you how solar power will save you money. We're located conveniently here in the Verde Valley and are dedicated to helping the valley go solar. So remember, the energy solution comes up every morning.
So I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Orkin has pest control down to a science.
When your business chooses Orkin's Precision Protection Program, you get a tailored pest control program for your specific industry and environment.
Your business can benefit from over a century of experience, training, and scientific knowledge that define the Orkin man.
Maximum protection, minimum exposure, backed by one of the industry's most comprehensive guarantees.
Choose your locally owned and operated Northern Arizona Orkin and get more than an exterminator. Get an expert.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catalfamo. We are continuing our conversation with Yavapai County School Superintendent Tim Carter. We have talked about the before, we have talked about the during. Now let's talk about the present, which is what kind of school year we're going to be looking at. You mentioned early on about splitting up class sizes, and of course, that has a lot of ramifications that would take much longer than this show's duration to talk about, but staffing is something I think we should definitely talk about. So we've got just a few more minutes here. I'm going to combine two questions. What do you do about the staffing capacity if you have to split these kids up by the numbers you had discussed earlier? And also, what can parents do now over the summer to prepare their kids for in-class learning if we get to that point?
Well, good questions, and realize that most of this is speculation about what could happen, not necessarily what will happen. So if we're talking about staffing, we need to realize that in most school districts, about 80% of their entire budget is in people. It's salaries and benefits. So you can't talk about people without talking about school budgets.
Right.
So you also need to realize that most of our teacher contracts have already been approved by governing boards, and teachers have already signed a contract, for the most part, for next school year.
Yes.
So, and then that brings the third issue to the table, and that is the legal ramifications here. Plus the statutory requirements of what the current law requires, both for teachers and for the number of days and the number of minutes for students. So those issues, the legal ramifications, the financial implications, and the staffing patterns and the work expectations, those are three of the most difficult things that we're going to deal with, period, even if we didn't have some kind of a pandemic to deal with and restrictions around that. So when we talk about staffing, we have to go back to the budget piece. If we're going to increase staff time, we have to have budget that allows that. If we're going to cut staff time, then that's good for the budget, but it may create a legal issue if we've already signed a contract with teachers saying that you're going to work these number of days, these number of hours for this much money.
Right.
So you can, your reader or your listeners, I think, can understand that this is a pretty significant issue.
Yes.
What we're thinking about doing, I mean, some of the thoughts that are taking place is we could reduce the number of days in the school year. Current law allows us to go down to 144 days instead of the traditional 180 days.
Okay. And
give districts then the flexibility during an entire extended window of maybe 10 months in which to put those days. That might give the flexibility where you had one group of students working online, those that could and had the capacity to do that, and another working face-to-face.
Right.
That certainly could be part of the issue. But even if you reduce your days to 144 days and you have to do double sessions, that's going to put an impact on the staffing issue, because if I have a teacher that's teaching in the morning for 5 hours, and that same teacher then has to come back in the afternoon or evening and teach for another 5 hours, that is a very difficult thing to do, because
yes.
we now are elongating the expectancy on that teacher of the number of hours a day that they work. And that is going to create budget implications and potential legal implications with those contracts. Right. We could go the other direction. We could say, all right, let's extend the school year to 235 days, which the law also allows. Mm-hmm. Well, that might work, but now instead of teachers who traditionally would anticipate working 180 days are now working considerably longer than that, which also is going to have legal implications and budget implications. So I think your listeners can realize then why this is such a complicated issue and why it will, in many cases, restrict what that school, either district or charter, is going to be able to do.
Now, what should parents do over the summer to prepare their kids for the possibility of in-class learning?
Well, I think that's a difficult question as well. First of all, we know that some of our parents have just done a wonderful job of stepping up and effectively becoming homeschoolers.
Yes.
And I can show examples where it's almost going to be like the kids probably didn't miss anything. In fact, in some cases, they had more one-on-one interaction, and they had more outside of school types of activities that would supplant and supplement what they would normally do in a classroom by real life experience. Mm-hmm. And that's wonderful. But I can also tell you that we know for a fact that many students, because you may have the entire family working, mm-hmm. or maybe you only have one parent, or the child's being raised by a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt,
yes,
that almost nothing happened for the last 9 weeks. And that brings us to another issue that the pandemic is exacerbating for us, and that is that we know that some students have this regression during the summer. Mm-hmm. They take 9 weeks off, and when they come back to the new school year, they need 2 to 3 to 4, sometime more weeks to simply get them back to where they were at the end of the previous year.
Yes.
So if we have students who really did almost nothing for 9 weeks, and they have another 9-week summer, that's 18 weeks. And we've never seen what that regression might actually look like, but we all anticipate that it's going to be far worse. And so that has to be taken into account with many of our students as well. So what we're suggesting for parents is that they try to be as actively engaged with students, have them continuing to read, have them continuing to do those kinds of activities that they would normally do in the summer, but try to involve more academically oriented types of things as well. And some parents we know will be able to do that, and we know some parents simply will not be able to.
Well, it is quite a daunting task to try to navigate this COVID-19 pandemic, and I know that there are only a few people who can handle it, and you are one of them, Mr. Carter. Yavapai County School Superintendent Tim Carter, again, thank you very, very much for coming on. I really appreciate talking to you, and we're going to definitely have to have you come on again when we get a little closer to the school year.
We'll be happy to do that. Thank you very much.
Yes, of course, anytime. So that's going to do it for this episode of Countywide. I want to thank you very much for watching and listening. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again next time.